If who you think you are is a messy person, it doesn't matter what organization system you try, it's not going to fit who you think you are. And therefore, it's going to be hard for you to show up as the person who organizes yourself. You're listening to the Life Edit Project podcast, where busy, ambitious high achievers get the tools they need to fight perfectionism and overwhelm so they can smash their goals without all the drama. I'm your host, recovering overachiever turned professional life coach, Elizabeth Burrows. Let's get to it. Good day, good people. Welcome back to the Life Edit Project podcast. I'm your host, as always, Coach Elizabeth, and I'm super excited to have you here today. Today, we have a juicy topic, a juicy episode. We are talking about self-concept. If you've never heard of it, if you've never thought about it, it's fine. There are no prereqs to this episode. I'm going to explain to you what self-concept is. I'm also going to tell you about a few common traps to avoid with your self-concept. And of course, I'm going to tie it all together by talking about why it matters and, what you can do going forward. But first, I have a few announcements and reminders for you. Drum roll, please. We have just passed a milestone and surpassed 1,000 downloads. Yay! So I'm super excited about that. For all of y'all who don't know anything about podcast analytics and don't really know what that means, it means that over the lifetime of this show, you all have tuned in and played my episodes more than 1,000 times. And I'm just so grateful for you all showing up and supporting. That means so much to me. When I started this show, it was really just because I had things to say and I had no idea if anybody wanted to listen. And the fact that y'all have listened over 1,000 times means something to me. So thank you. Thank you so much for your support. If you want to keep supporting the show and help me reach more people, or if you just want to be part of the community and show your girl some love, please do me a favor and leave a 5-star rating and review for the Life Edit Project podcast on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you don't know how to leave a review, there are instructions on my website. Simply go to lifeeditproject.com/podcast and you will have lots of instructions, step-by-step instructions that you can follow to leave reviews in either of those places. And when you do that, you will have a chance to become my Listener Bae of the Week. And that is where I read your review and give you a shout out on a future episode of the show. So if you want to be featured and if you want to be one of my Listener Baes, just go ahead and leave me one of those reviews in one or both of those places. And I would very much appreciate it. Another thing I'm really excited about, I don't know if I said this last week when season 2 started, but the Life Edit Project podcast is now streaming on YouTube. That's right, YouTube. Most of my listeners, y'all are on either Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And of course, I'm on all the major platforms. So Amazon Music, Audible, Pandora, just all the places, right? But for season 1, I did not focus on YouTube at all. Well, Life Edit Project totally has a YouTube channel. Now, I'm not doing a whole lot of video content over there. So right now, this podcast is just audio only, but you can stream it over there if that's where you like to listen to your inspirational and motivational content. But definitely keep an eye out on the YouTube channel because this season, there will be a couple of special episodes that will have video podcasts to go along with the audio only podcast. So those videos will be uploaded to YouTube when they are ready. So make sure you're following me subscribe over on YouTube. I definitely appreciate that. And of course, all of these links will be in the show notes for your convenience because I like to make it easy for you. Let's get back to business. I'm really excited about today's show because I'm starting to cover some different territory than what I talked about in season 1. So in season 1, I was talking about really, really practical tips. And I gave you lots of strategies to kind of overcome some of the major challenges that I know my high achievers and perfectionists are dealing with. But this season, for season 2, I am still going to be talking about lots of strategy. I'll still have lots of practical tips for you so that you can make the changes you want to make in your life. But I will also be adding to that more conversations about mindset, because if you don't have the mindset to back up your strategy, it doesn't matter how good the strategy you have, your mindset will always get in the way of your execution. And y'all, listen, I'm not just a life coach. I specialize in mindset. So I am a mindset coach. So I'm going to be talking more about mindset related things here on the show this season. And this season, I will also be bringing you some more unfiltered conversations with real people who have real practical insights that you care about and that can help you make changes in your life. And if you liked the Ask Me Anything episodes we had last season, there will definitely be at least one more Ask Me Anything episode later this season. So stay tuned for those updates, and I will make sure that I make lots of announcements so that you can figure out how to submit a question for the Ask Me Anything episode. But today, we are focusing on the topic of self-concept. And self-concept is a giant sliver of your mindset. And I already hear you asking, Coach Elizabeth, what is self-concept? Well, of course, I'm going to tell you. If you're taking notes, write this down because it's time for another Coach Elizabeth definition. Self-concept is simply a collection of thoughts, opinions, beliefs, and ideals that a person holds about themselves. One more time for the people in the back and for those of you who write slowly. Self-concept is a collection of thoughts, opinions, beliefs, and ideals that a person holds about themselves. So I want to just start this conversation with a question. Who do you think you are? And now I'm not asking you that question with attitude. I'm not rolling my neck as I do it. It's a real question. It's not just the title of this episode. This is a question that I'm inviting you to seriously consider, because the answer to this question can be life-changing. But why does your self-concept matter in the first place? Why is it important to know what your self-concept is? I'll tell you why. It's because your self-concept is literally the foundation of the life that you create for yourself. If you can answer the question, who do you think you are, and you can answer it honestly, it's like taking a shortcut to identify and name your self-concept. But why does your self-concept matter in the first place? Why is it important to know what your self-concept is? It's because your self-concept is literally the foundation of the life that you create for yourself. Who you think you are influences who you are being, the person you are showing up as in any single moment of your life. But who you think you are, your self-concept, is not the same as who you can be, as who you have the potential to be. And your self-concept is often way different than who you wish you were. And we are constantly striving to make changes and close the gap between who we think we are and who we want to be. And for those of you who are trying to make any change in your life, if you're trying to start any process of transformation, large or small, a big key to being successful with change is being able to change or evolve your self-concept. If you want to change your life, you have to be able to change your self-concept, period. We've all seen, and often a lot of us have experienced, the struggle of trying to get changes to stick. Now, there are a whole lot of reasons why it might be hard to get a change to stick. Right? Like you might be trying to get out of bed without hitting the snooze button, or you might be struggling to maybe give up drinking, right? This is still early in the year. Lots of folks did a dry January, right? And sometimes those types of changes are harder to make. Sometimes the reasons why a change doesn't stick is because the change you're trying to make goes against the grain of who you think you are. Let me give you an example. Let's say you think of yourself as a messy person. and you decide you're tired of the mess and you want to get organized. It's going to be hard to stick with any kind of organization system if you identify more with the mess than you do with the organization. If who you think you are is a messy person, it doesn't matter what organization system you try, it's not going to fit who you think you are. And therefore, it's going to be hard for you to show up as the person who organizes yourself because you identify as a messy person. So again, I ask you the question, who do you think you are? Recognizing your self-concept is the first step to getting any kind of change you want to make in your life to stick. Because, in part, you have to acknowledge what your starting point is to be able to effectively plan the process of transformation. So, your self-concept is really important, not just because it plays such a key role in making any kind of change you want to make in your life, but also because it plays a really big role in how you show up in your life every day, even when you're just trying to maintain the status quo. And that's why I want to talk to you today about 3 common traps that it's very easy to fall into when it comes to this collection of thoughts and beliefs and opinions and ideals that we have about ourselves. I'm going to talk to you about 3 specific traps that I want to help you avoid so that you can close the gap between who you think you are and who you want to be. Let's go. So the first trap that we can fall into when it comes to our self-concept is that of having limiting beliefs. Yes, if you have listened to literally any type of podcast about, mindset, or if you have been following any type of coach on the interwebs, you have definitely heard the term limiting beliefs, right? And maybe you know what this is, but maybe you don't really know why it matters and how it factors into the concept that you have of yourself, but I'm going to explain it to you. So a limiting belief, very simply, is judging your future ability based on usually your past capabilities. It often looks like deciding in advance that something is off limits for you without ever testing your possibilities. It's like telling yourself no, even if everyone else around you is waiting to tell you yes. And that's literally why we call it a limiting belief. It's because the belief you have about yourself is the only thing that limits you from getting what it is that you want. So an example of a limiting belief might be still thinking of yourself as an inexperienced professional, even though you've been working in your career or in your industry for over 5 years. Right? That thought, believing that you are inexperienced, is a limiting belief. Another example of a limiting belief might be telling yourself that you're not good with money because you racked up a bunch of credit card debt 15 years ago when you were in undergrad, right? Even though you are 15 years removed from that college experience, and even though, maybe you haven't made any other major financial decisions, you're still telling yourself that you're not good with money, and you are limiting yourself and what's possible for you based on that one thing that you did that one time so many years ago. A second self-concept trap that I would love to help you avoid is the trap of filtering. And maybe I should say over-filtering. So over-filtering looks like completely dismissing certain aspects of yourself, whether they're feelings or habits or tendencies, because they're inconsistent with who you wish you were. So an example of this might be always buying clothes that are a size too small. right? Because what you wish you were was a size 8, but maybe you're currently a size 10. And so you're just going to dismiss the fact that a size 8 doesn't exactly fit you, and you're just going to keep buying that size 8. Okay, another example of filtering or over filtering might look like telling yourself you're so busy and you don't have time for anything else, and ignoring the fact that that weekly report you get from your iPhone says that you average spending 4 hours a day on social media. Boop. Right? That's literally dismissing a certain behavior that you have because it's not consistent with who you wish you were, or it's not consistent with the way you would like to see yourself. Now, I'm calling it filtering because it's not explaining away these things. It's literally pretending like these things aren't happening. It's being unable to see these things and discounting them and dismissing them as anomalous when really they're part of a larger pattern. A third self-concept trap that all of us should be very mindful of is the trap of over-identifying. So over-identifying is what happens when we inflate the weight of a particular aspect of ourselves until it becomes the central part of our identity. It's literally the core aspect. It's the anchor of all of the things that we think and believe about ourselves. Now, there are a lot of different things, a lot of different aspects of ourselves or our lives that people can over-identify with. And you've definitely seen some of these. Maybe even some of this sounds familiar if I'm talking to you. So things I've seen people over-identify with include their astrology sign. I've seen people over-identify with their hometown. Right? Their whole personality is, I'm from New York. All right, New Yorkers, don't come for me. I'm just, that's just an example. Another thing that I've seen people over-identify with is their favorite sports team, right? Hello, Cowboys fans. Yeah. Here in South Florida, we got all the Dolphins. Yeah. Another thing I've seen people over-identify with is a physical trait that they have. It might be their hair. It might be their six-pack abs, right? But a physical trait. It might be the color of their eyes. Over-identifying with a physical trait until that's the only thing about themselves that they see or that they feel is important. People can also over-identify with something like their diet, right? I'm a vegan. I'm a carnivore. I'm eating paleo, right? And that becomes their identity. A big one for me, because I don't want y'all to think that I'm exempt from all of this. A big thing that I over-identified with for years that I think I've gotten better with is I'm a night owl. Ooh-wee, that was a big one for me, is over-identifying with the fact that I had a habit or a pattern, really just a biological rhythm of staying up late. And for me, that often manifested as me resisting any kind of pattern of behavior that looked like being a morning person, right? I'm a night owl, therefore I'm not a morning person. That was a big one for me. For many of my coaching clients, I have seen my clients over-identify with things like their job position or their career, being busy, that's a real big one, or even identifying with a particular struggle that they've had in their life, whether it's a current struggle that they're dealing with or a struggle that happened, at an earlier point in their life, and that becomes central to their identity. Now, I want to make it clear, I am not saying that any of these traps are wrong, and that's why I'm calling them traps and not mistakes. Limiting beliefs aren't wrong in and of themselves because limits exist, and it's not wrong to acknowledge that limits exist. But limiting beliefs become a trap when we artificially set limits that literally keep us away from what it is that we want. When we impose these artificial limits on ourselves and we become the thing, the person, the obstacle that is in between who we are and where we would like to be. Filtering in and of itself is not bad. In fact, filtering can be extremely useful, especially when we're trying to make a change in our lives, right? Because it becomes important to filter out the things that are inconsistent with the place that we're trying to go, right? But excessive filtering can become a trap because it can make us out of touch with reality, right? And it can start making the way that we view ourselves and then the choices that we make inconsistent with our actual reality. For example, let's say you have the tendency to have lots of angry outbursts. If you excessively filter for your angry outbursts and you dismiss them all as one-off situations, maybe you filter them out because it never escalates to the point of violence. Or maybe you dismiss every single one of your angry outbursts as being attributed to being caused by someone else, right? Therefore, it's not your anger. It's just you reacting to people, doing things that anger you all around you, right? But if you excessively filter out for the angry outbursts, then it might prevent you from seeing the fact that maybe you have anger management issues. Right? And then the choices that you make about the relationships that you take on, the types of situations that you put yourself in, or even the type of coping mechanisms and skills that you pursue to deal with anger. If you are constantly filtering out the angry outbursts as exceptions and not part of your baseline, then you can't plan to change that. Over-identifying with a particular aspect of yourself. Listen, all of us have some part of ourselves that we over-identify with, some piece, some belief about ourselves, some thought or opinion about ourselves, some ideal we hold ourselves to that is a central part of who we think we are. It's a central part of our identity. And that's not in and of itself a bad thing. In fact, a lot of the examples I gave you about the things that people over-identify with, it's fun to identify ourselves in these ways. Lots of people who over-identify with their astrology sign, man, they love it. They think it's the best thing ever. They think it's so useful. Lots of people who over-identify with their sports team do it because of the love and the passion that they have. It becomes literally something that they want to throw money at and that they want to spend lots of time in. And it's not actually keeping them away from anything. However, when you over-identify with something that is a temporary characteristic, like maybe your weight, or a temporary circumstance that literally cannot last forever, like a job position, or if you over-identify with something that's not completely up to you, like maybe a relationship, you might experience something like an existential crisis when that temporary characteristic or circumstance changes. That is part of the risk of over-identifying with anything. Then there is the fact that these three traps, limiting beliefs, over-filtering, and over-identifying, they can reinforce each other and actually widen the gap between who we think we are and who we wish we were. Let's take, for example, an experience of failure. Let's say you auditioned to be in a play. Okay, that's a random example, but we're going to run with it. Let's say you audition to be in a play and you don't get selected. You don't get the part that you auditioned for. You don't get chosen as the understudy. You don't get chosen to be an extra. You don't get a part at all. You might experience that as failure, an instant of failure. Just because it was a failure doesn't mean that you have to identify as a failure as a person, right? But if you are over-identifying in this particular case, you might take this experience of failure and make it part of your core identity. So now you've got a case where you are over-identifying with the experience of failure, and now you are defining yourself as a failure. That failure has then become a limiting belief that prevents you from trying because you believe that failure is inevitable. And those two things together can make it very easy for you to start filtering out any types of success that might come your way, any example of success in your life, you start to call them flukes, or you don't take credit for them, or suddenly they're not good enough that they don't count and they don't balance out the failure. In that same play, in the same example, you audition for the part, you don't get the lead role, but they give you a tertiary role, that a very minor part where you've got maybe 3 lines in the whole play. Your brain is going to filter that out, and it's not going to count it as a success. You're not celebrating the fact that you got cast in any particular part. You're just going to stick with the belief that you are a failure and that you don't get the parts that you want. And so these 3 things together then reinforce themselves and integrate themselves into who it is that you think you are. And you now think that you are a person that can never get the lead part. Now, why does any of this matter? Why are we talking about self-concept here in episode 2 of season 2 of the Life Edit Project podcast? Well, we're starting here because, as I said earlier in this podcast, your self-concept is a huge part of your mindset. And your mindset is a huge part of being able to execute on any type of strategy and being able to make any kind of change and create the life that you want for yourself. It's important because whether you have intentionally cultivated one or whether you're living out what you've got by default, you already have a self-concept. There is already something that you think, believe, and feel about yourself. There is already a set of ideals and standards that you hold yourself to, even if you haven't decided on purpose what those things are. But here's what I want to remind you of. The way that you identify yourself is always up to you. Even if what you have chosen to think about yourself has been choices that you've made by default up until this point, you still get to choose here on out what you will think and believe about yourself. You get to decide who you think you are. And I would like to add that if no one told you before today, I'm telling you, you get to hold an identity for yourself that is totally separate and distinct from what you do, and one that is totally separate and distinct from the environment that you are in. No matter what self-concept you've had in the past, and no matter what your self-concept is today, you don't have to be stuck with it. You're allowed to evolve. You're allowed to change. You're allowed to change your life. And if you're going to evolve, and if your life is going to change, your self-concept has to evolve and change with you. So, what does this mean for you going forward? I have 2 suggestions that I want to leave with you. The first is another question. So we started this episode off with the question, who do you think you are? The question I'd like to leave you with is, who do you want to become? You get to not just identify where you are now, but also think about your future. Look forward, look ahead, and whatever it is that you decide you want to become, practice thinking those things and believing those things about yourself now. My second suggestion for you is to start feeding some new information into your self-concept feedback loop. And this is one of the things that I do as a life coach. One of the things that I help my clients with is to literally spot these self-concept traps in their life and help them work their way out of these traps or work their way around them when they show up and when we identify them. So if you are finally ready to build a self-concept that makes it easier for you to make the changes you want to make and to live the life that you want to live, book a sales call with me for one-on-one coaching. The link to schedule that call is right in the show notes because, I like to make it easy for you. I cannot wait to work with you, and I cannot wait to learn who you think you are. All right, that's it for now. I will be back in your ears next week with another juicy episode. Until then, peace. Hey, thanks Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. If you have a question or a favorite insight from today's conversation, I would love to hear from you. Send me a message on social media. I'm in all the places. My handle is @LifeEditProject, all one word. And of course, my accounts are linked up in the show notes to make it easy for you. So holla at your girl. I'll be back in your ears next week with a fresh episode. Make sure that you are subscribed to the Life Edit Project podcast wherever you like to listen so that you don't miss a thing. Until then, peace.